They looked like the perfect family, but the truth was creepy. Julie Jensen grew up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, the sole daughter in a bustling household with six brothers. Raised in a deeply Christian family, Julie was cherished for her kindness, lively spirit, and remarkable ability. In the early 1980s, during her college years, she met Mark Jensen. Their connection blossomed over time, leading to an intermittent courtship that lasted through their college years. Once Mark completed his studies, the couple decided to commit to a life together, marrying in the spring of 1980. After their wedding, the Jensens moved to the prestigious Coral Beach area in Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin. Mark embarked on a successful career at a renowned stockbroker firm, climbing the corporate ladder with his quiet determination and dedication. Meanwhile, Julie took up a role as an administrative assistant in a financial brokerage, contributing to the family income and gaining her own professional experience. In 1990, the Jensen household welcomed their first child, David, and 5 years later, Douglas was born, further completing their family. As Mark's career flourished, he became a respected figure within his firm, known for his drive and ambition. In contrast, Julie chose to focus on her family, leaving her job to become a stay-at-home mother. She dedicated herself wholeheartedly to nurturing and raising their sons in a loving, supportive environment. Despite the demands of parenthood, Julie and Mark appeared to have an ideal relationship, often seen sharing warm, affectionate moments that made their marriage seem nearly perfect. Their laughter and charisma made them popular in their community, where they were often seen engaging in various outdoor activities like gardening and yard maintenance, enhancing their image as the quintessential American family. However, the Jensen family's outward appearance of happiness and success masked deeper, hidden complexities. Beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life, troubling secrets began to emerge, suggesting that not everything was as idyllic as it appeared. This revelation would soon shake the foundation of their community and question the facade of the perfect family they had so carefully constructed. Their beautiful home and successful careers painted a picture of prosperity and happiness, blessed with two joyful and healthy sons. Yet, the darker undertones lurking behind their flawless exterior were poised to reveal a starkly different reality, proving that appearances can be profoundly deceiving. Julie and Mark Jensen harbored secrets that were kept hidden from the public eye, secrets that would tragically culminate in Julie's untimely demise. As the details began to unravel, the perfect image they had crafted disintegrated, leaving their neighbors to doubt the authenticity of the couple's seemingly flawless union. On the afternoon of December 3rd, 1998, a distressing call from Mark to 911 reported that his wife, Julie, was unresponsive. When emergency services arrived at the Jensen's Pleasant Prairie residence, they discovered Julie motionless in bed, seemingly asleep under the covers. However, it quickly became evident to the paramedics and police that Julie was deceased, with no immediate signs of violence or overdose that could easily explain her passing. Mark told the responding officers that after collecting their two sons, aged 8 and 3, from school, he found Julie unresponsive. He noted her recent struggles with mental health and mentioned a bottle of antidepressants prescribed to her, which was visible on the kitchen counter. Overwhelmed by grief, Mark expressed his deep concerns about Julie's recent issues with sleep and appetite. Desperate for answers about the sudden loss, the local district attorney, prompted by the circumstances, arrived to assess the scene for himself. Upon inspecting the bedroom, he noted the positioning of Julie's body seemed contrived, suggesting the possibility of foul play. He intended to have crime scene experts conduct a thorough investigation of the house. However, he faced a significant hurdle as he could not immediately establish probable cause to secure a search warrant for the Jensen home, complicating the investigation into Julie's mysterious death. Despite the initial lack of clear legal grounds for a search, the district attorney was deeply suspicious of the circumstances surrounding Julie Jensen's death. His resolve was bolstered upon seeing Mark Jensen being comforted by the chaplain of the police department. He approached Mark and explained that a comprehensive investigation into Julie's death would require further scrutiny. Mark, appearing cooperative, consented to the search of their home. Upon arrival, crime scene investigators quickly noticed a home computer in the residence. Given that in 1998, owning a computer was still a rarity for many households, it was immediately flagged as a potential source of crucial evidence. Recognizing its significance, the investigators promptly removed the computer from the home, intending to perform a detailed forensic analysis at the crime lab. Further inquiries revealed that the local police were already familiar with Julie Jensen. Officers often referred to her by her first name. This detail intrigued the district attorney, sparking questions about whether a history of reported harassment against Julie could be linked to her death. His suspicions grew as he delved deeper into her past interactions with local law enforcement. The district attorney discovered that Julie had maintained a meticulous log detailing years of harassment. This record chronicled a disturbing array of incidents from seemingly trivial annoyances to severe threats. Julie's diligent documentation provided a timeline that highlighted an escalation in the harassment she endured over the years. Among the documented incidents, Julie reported that her front porch furniture was frequently rearranged, and she received unsolicited, explicit photos at her home. One particularly alarming entry detailed how explicit images were left under the windshield wiper of Mark's car at his office. These entries painted a picture of a woman living under constant threat. Despite Julie's repeated calls for help, the local police struggled with resource constraints and failed to pinpoint the harasser. Over the 7 years that the Jensens lived in Pleasant Prairie, Julie contacted the police dozens of times, yet each call only added to a growing list of unsolved complaints, leaving her to cope with an increasingly hostile environment. Julie Jensen's efforts to seek help from local law enforcement met with repeated disappointments. Despite her persistent reports, the small-town police department struggled to make any significant headway in resolving the harassment cases. Given the complexity of the situation and the detectives' inability to pinpoint the culprits, they recommended a different tactic. They suggested that Julie and her husband Mark consider engaging a private investigator, hoping that someone with specialized skills and resources could achieve better results. Feeling constrained by the limited support from local police, Julie and Mark were advised to hire a private investigator. The detectives believed that a private investigator could offer the expertise and dedicated focus needed to delve deeper into the harassment issues that were disrupting their lives. Motivated by a desire for resolution, Julie and Mark followed this recommendation and sought out a professional with the necessary credentials. The private investigator they hired was a seasoned former police officer, well-versed in dealing with complex cases. At their first meeting, it was evident to him that Julie was profoundly affected by the ongoing harassment, displaying clear signs of fear and anxiety for her family's safety. He listened intently as Julie described the distressing impact the situation had on her life. During this conversation, Julie revealed a past indiscretion to the private investigator. She confessed to having had a brief affair with a coworker, Perry Tarika, years earlier. Julie suspected that Perry might be the one behind the harassment, a suspicion fueled by unresolved issues from their past encounter. She explained that Mark was aware of the fling with Perry and they were trying to move past it and focus on their family. Julie's guilt over her past actions weighed heavily on her, fearing that Perry's return might be an attempt to destabilize her family further. The private investigator reassured her, promising to conduct a thorough investigation to explore any connections between Perry and the harassment. He committed to uncovering evidence and leads that could shed light on the situation. Armed with Perry Tarika's name as a potential suspect, the private investigator began probing into his background. Discoveries that Perry had recently relocated from Wisconsin to North Carolina added a layer of complexity. Julie had speculated about Perry's possible travels to Chicago and his potential returns to Wisconsin, which might align with the timeline of the harassment incidents, intensifying the suspicions around him. Despite the private investigator's inability to catch anyone suspicious around Mark's office, Julie Jensen remained firmly convinced that Perry was orchestrating the harassment. In a bid to gather undeniable evidence, she instructed the investigator to conduct detailed surveillance outside her husband's workplace. The investigator devoted many hours to monitoring the area, hoping to catch a glimpse of any suspicious activity or individual. Yet, after several days of vigilant observation, the investigator came up empty-handed. There were no signs of anyone lurking or engaging in unusual behavior near the office. Frustrated and disheartened by the lack of evidence, Julie contacted the investigator and requested the cessation of the surveillance efforts, despite her ongoing belief that Perry was responsible for her troubles. This incident caught the attention of the district attorney handling the investigation of Julie's mysterious death. A month into the investigation, the district attorney received the results from the toxicology tests performed during Julie's autopsy. Surprisingly, the tests indicated that Julie had not been exposed to any common drugs or poisons, which deepened the mystery surrounding her death. Prompted by this puzzling outcome, the district attorney turned to the crime lab's computer experts for further examination of the Jensens' home computer. The experts uncovered search histories that indicated someone had been researching drug interactions, specifically focusing on ethylene glycol, a toxic chemical commonly found in antifreeze and known for its lethal effects if consumed. Recognizing the potential link to Julie's death, the district attorney immediately ordered a re-examination of Julie's toxicology results, specifically testing for traces of ethylene glycol. The results of this second test were alarming. Traces of the poison were indeed found in Julie's system. Although it was now clear that Julie had been poisoned, the district attorney faced the daunting task of determining whether her death was a result of accidental poisoning or if she had been deliberately murdered. As the district attorney delved deeper into Julie Jensen's life, he unearthed that she had been struggling with postpartum depression since the early 1990s, diagnosed after the birth of her first son, David. A family therapist had prescribed her Paxil, an antidepressant, to manage her symptoms. This revelation brought Julie's mental health into focus and raised questions about her emotional state leading up to her death. Days before her untimely death, on December 1st, Julie had visited her doctor, voicing feelings of misery and depression. The doctor, aware of her ongoing battle with depression, prescribed her Paxil once again. However, during this visit, Julie assured her doctor that she had no intentions of harming herself. This conversation was later shared with the district attorney, who found himself weighing the possibility that despite her assurances, Julie might have been considering drastic measures. Despite the doctor's note suggesting a potential for self-harm, the district attorney was skeptical. He believed that the circumstances of Julie's death pointed to murder rather than suicide. Typically, in cases of suicide by ethylene glycol poisoning, evidence of the substance is usually found near the scene. Yet no traces of ethylene glycol were discovered in the Jensen home during the initial investigation, which puzzled the authorities. Further complicating the investigation was the analysis of the toxicology results, which indicated a low concentration of ethylene glycol in Julie's system. This suggested a pattern of small doses ingested over several days rather than a single lethal dose. This pattern seemed inconsistent with a typical suicide, leading the district attorney to suspect foul play. The focus then shifted to Perry Tirico, Julie's former lover and a suspect in her harassment. The district attorney considered the possibility of his involvement in Julie's death. However, after verifying his whereabouts with his employer, it was confirmed that Perry was in North Carolina working during the time of Julie's death, effectively providing him with a solid alibi and removing him from the list of suspects. With Perry ruled out, attention turned towards Mark Jensen, Julie's husband. The discovery of a heated email exchange between Mark and Kelly Labonte, an assistant at his brokerage firm, added a new layer of suspicion. This development prompted the district attorney to scrutinize Mark more closely, considering the possibility that he might have had a motive to harm Julie, thus positioning him as the prime suspect in her murder. When computer experts examined the Jensen family's home computer, they unearthed a series of incriminating email exchanges. These messages revealed that Kelly, who was married and living in St. Louis, had initiated contact with Mark Jensen. Their correspondence had led to secret meetings in St. Louis, which occurred several times before Julie's death. 4 months into the investigation, Mark and his eldest son, David, visited the Pleasant Prairie Police Department to inquire about the progress of the case. Mark, already a primary suspect in the case, unwittingly presented the detectives with an opportunity to further interrogate him under the guise of providing updates. Recognizing the potential to glean more information, a detective invited Mark to step into an interrogation room for a more formal discussion. Meanwhile, an officer stayed with David, ensuring his safety and comfort during his father's interrogation. Inside the interrogation room, the detectives pressed Mark about his relationship with Kelly Labonte. Mark vehemently denied any romantic involvement, insisting that their relationship was purely platonic. However, the detectives were not easily swayed, as they had concrete evidence to the contrary: the explicit emails exchanged between Mark and Kelly. Moreover, they discovered plans for Kelly, who had recently divorced her husband, to relocate from St. Louis to Pleasant Prairie, a move that had taken place just weeks after Julie's death. This relocation raised serious suspicions about the nature of Mark's relationship with Kelly and his potential motives. During the investigation, detectives also found that Mark had hastily disposed of 15 bags of Julie's belongings shortly after her passing. This action was perceived as particularly suspicious and indicative of someone trying to erase traces of Julie's presence from his life. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Mark continued to assert his innocence regarding any involvement in Julie's death. However, the interrogation took a dramatic turn when the detectives presented a letter written by Julie before her demise, addressed to the police department. In it, Julie explicitly stated that if something were to happen to her, Mark should be considered responsible. The letter detailed Julie's growing apprehensions about her husband's behavior, underscored by a disturbing discovery she made, a note in Mark's business planner that seemed out of place and alarming. Julie's preemptive message to law enforcement was a clear indication of her deep fears and suspicions towards her husband, casting further doubt on Mark's claims of innocence. The note that Julie inadvertently discovered contained alarming references to drug supply, razor blades, and syringe, which understandably heightened her suspicions about her safety. In her meticulously written letter to the police, Julie expressed a fervent hope that her suspicions were unfounded, but she couldn't shake the fear that something might happen to her. Recognizing the potential danger she might be in, Julie took a precautionary measure to safeguard her concerns. She entrusted a neighbor with the critical letter, instructing them to deliver it to the police if anything untoward occurred to her. True to her instructions, after Julie's tragic death in December 1998, the neighbor handed the letter to the detective handling her case. During Mark's intense interrogation, the detective confronted him with a copy of Julie's letter, which shockingly included a photograph of the incriminating list, now referred to ominously as the kill list. Leaving Mark alone in the room momentarily, the detective observed his reactions through the two-way glass, gauging his demeanor for any signs of guilt or distress. When the detective re-entered the interrogation room, he pressed Mark for a confession, hoping to crack his composure. Despite the heavy accusations, including suggestions that Mark was behind the years of harassment Julie suffered, he staunchly denied any wrongdoing. Mark conceded that while he had retained and even strategically placed explicit photos around their home, it was a reactionary measure taken after Julie disclosed her affair with her co-worker, Perry Tirico. After 4 hours of grueling interrogation, the detective had to face the disappointing reality that there was no definitive evidence linking Mark to the murder. Although the detective and the district attorney suspected that Mark had orchestrated his wife's murder to free himself for a new life with his girlfriend Kelly, they couldn't legally substantiate their suspicions. With no concrete evidence to continue holding him, they were compelled to release Mark, leaving him free to leave the police department, much to their frustration. Despite the conclusive toxicology reports that confirmed Julie was poisoned with ethylene glycol, the detective and district attorney were hamstrung by the lack of direct evidence tying her husband, Mark, to the crime. Their frustration was compounded by the inability to prove Mark's involvement in the suspicious internet searches about substance and drug interactions. This lack of concrete evidence posed a significant challenge in establishing his guilt in the eyes of the law. Furthermore, the legal complexities surrounding the admissibility of Julie's letter, in which she explicitly named Mark as responsible if anything happened to her, added another layer of difficulty to the prosecution's case. The fundamental right of a defendant to cross-examine witnesses against them became a pivotal issue. Julie's death meant she could not testify or be cross-examined, which potentially undermined the strength of her posthumous accusations in court. The district attorney contended that this legal hurdle should be overlooked due to the peculiar nature of the case, arguing that if Mark was indeed responsible for Julie's absence, then it was he who prevented her from testifying. Amidst these ongoing legal battles and years of striving to get Julie's accusatory letter admitted as evidence, Mark did not pause his life. He moved forward, planning a wedding with his girlfriend Kelly. This development alarmed the district attorney's team, who feared for Kelly's safety, suspecting she might also become a victim if their beliefs about Mark were correct. Driven by these concerns, the district attorney took decisive action and secured an arrest warrant for Mark, charging him with first-degree murder. When the police arrested him, Mark's reaction was one of utter disbelief. He seemed genuinely shocked as he was taken into custody. Despite this setback, Mark's financial resources allowed him to post a staggering $5 million cash bond, and he was soon released from jail. Mark's life continued to advance as he married Kelly and welcomed another child, all while raising his 2 sons with Julie. This progression in his personal life was a source of deep frustration and outrage for the detectives and the district attorney. They were exasperated to see him living as though Julie had never been a part of his life. Seemingly unaffected by the past allegations and ongoing investigation, their frustration was palpable as every step Mark took away from his past with Julie only intensified their resolve to prove his involvement in her death. Yet, with each passing day, the challenge of securing justice for Julie grew more daunting, with critical evidence just beyond their legal reach. The protracted legal battle over the admissibility of Julie's letter loomed large over the proceedings against Mark Jensen. As the years wore on, both Mark and the district attorney's team found themselves caught in a seemingly endless wait, with the outcome of the case hinging on the decision of whether Julie's letter could be used as evidence in court. Time moved slowly until a significant breakthrough occurred 8 years after Julie's death, bringing new momentum to the investigation. The turning point came unexpectedly when a colleague of Mark's, Ed Clubb, stepped forward with damning evidence. Ed had been reticent until then, holding back crucial information that directly implicated Mark in the crime. According to Ed, he and Mark had been drinking at a hotel bar during a business trip the night before Julie disappeared. Amidst a conversation about Ed's marital difficulties, Mark interjected with dark comments about his own wife. He expressed a deep-seated hatred for Julie and a chilling desire to end her life. At first, Ed dismissed Mark's words as a morbid joke. However, as Mark continued, he revealed disturbingly specific details about his plans, including the types of poisons he considered using and the websites he visited to research them. Overwhelmed by the gravity of Mark's intent, Ed initially doubted the seriousness of these threats and chose to stay silent, fearing he might have misinterpreted Mark's drunken ramblings. But as the investigation into Julie's death dragged on with little progress, Ed felt a moral imperative to come forward. He approached the detectives and shared his testimony, confessing his previous uncertainty about the credibility of Mark's threats. This testimony proved pivotal, prompting the judge to take immediate action by quadrupling Mark's bond and sending him back to jail to await trial. In a consequential ruling, the judge decided that Julie's letter, which directly implicated Mark, would be admissible in court. This decision was crucial as it offered a glimpse into Mark's potential motive and his capacity for premeditated harm, significantly bolstering the prosecution's case. On January 8, 2008, nearly 9 years after Julie's death, Mark Jensen was finally brought to trial. The proceedings were extensive, becoming one of the longest trials in Wisconsin history. After 7 weeks of testimony and evidence presentation, the jury deliberated for 8 days before convicting Mark of murder, sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Despite his conviction, Mark continued to challenge the verdict, filing multiple appeals over the years. Finally, in 2022, an appeals court controversially ruled that Julie's letter should not have been admitted as evidence, leading to a retrial. In February 2023, despite the previous ruling, Mark was once again found guilty in his second trial and received the same sentence of life in prison.